we lift up Annie to you right now and just ask you to bless her this morning, and may the words of her mouth and meditation of her heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're asking, or where you're saying the phrase, "It seemed like a good idea at the time"? Familiar thing for you. Have you ever thought something would be a good idea, and then as it played out, it turned out not to be such a great idea? This is a real discussion, so you get to respond.
Yes. I lit that firework in my room.
In your room.
Firework in his room. Yes, I think of when we decided we're going to fly home for Labor Day weekend to see our family. It'll be faster, they said. It'll be easier. It'll be less exhausting.
No.
No. It was one plane trip all over the country to the other, and we almost missed the whole weekend. And these things we think would be a great idea. It seemed like a good idea at the time. And another time in college, I think of Bellhaven had these different opportunities to do workout sessions at different times, and I was like, I'm going to go do this insanity workout. And then, of course, we got pumped up on adrenaline. I was like, I'm going to run back to my dorm room. That was not a good idea. It seemed like a good idea at the time, and I got to my room and threw up and never did insanity workout again. So not terribly effective. So there are some things we do that seem like a good idea at the time, and that they proved not to be. And similarly, have you ever decided, I'm going to do something because you think this action is going to bring you happiness or security, or even finally the victory over my enemy in this situation, and then as it played out, that didn't happen. That didn't end up being the case. You found yourself in a situation like that. That you're like, this is going to make me happy. This is going to bring me peace. And
if I just had that guitar, I just need one more.
Yeah, exactly. These things, we're like, this is what I need. This will do it. And I know this is what I need. I know what's best for myself in this situation. And I think a couple different things. One example, my friend Julie was telling me about when she went to the beach earlier this summer, and she was like, this is going to be a good thing. This will bring me security. This will bring me protection from the sun. I'm going to apply sunscreen. Every time that it runs out, I'm going to apply this sunscreen. However, she didn't take the time to read the label and recognize this sunscreen was expired. So she still got burnt to a crisp, even though she reapplied sunscreen repeatedly, religiously, every time she was supposed to. Like, that seemed like a great idea. Like, she was doing what would make her secure. But in the end, it did not result in that because she didn't read it carefully. And something even a little deeper, something that I experienced and find myself kind of in this heart condition repeatedly. And in college, I would find myself playing intramural sports a lot. You all know me, that I'm not terribly athletic. I'm a ballerina and like a musician. And so I was like, there were these people that I thought were cool, and there were these boys that I liked in college, and I was like, I could just do this and put myself in position. Maybe they'll notice me. And that was it's not an altogether wrong thing to do. I made some good friends and was active and things like that, but the condition of my heart and my motivation for that, it was all about like, I know that this will make me happy. This will make me secure. This will help me to get noticed and get what I think I need. And it was a frustrating position to be in, and kind of this bewildering, like, God, why don't you notice that I'm unhappy being single? Or why don't you notice, like, if I can just put the pieces together right, then I can make this happen. I can control the situation, and God will do what I need him to do. And of course, you don't think about, like, I'm trying to manipulate God, but that's what I was doing. And in 1 Samuel chapter 4, we find the Israelites in a very similar position. I'm going to be doing kind of a quick walkthrough of a story from 1 Samuel 4 through 7 today. And so this happens right after, the end of chapter 3, beginning of chapter 4 tells us Samuel over against the old prophet Eli sees the Lord. The Lord appears to him. He sees him and he hears the word of the Lord. And That's kind of the setup. And then it all of a sudden shifts gears here in this beginning of verse 1. Still it says, "Now Israel went out to meet the Philistines in battle." This becomes a really familiar refrain throughout the story in 1st and 2nd Samuel, right? The Philistines are the enemies par excellence of the Israelites throughout the story. And so again and again, there's the Israelites and the Philistines in battle. And in this battle, the Philistines defeat the Israelites, and which again is kind of a familiar thing. And the Israelites get frustrated, and they say, why did God let this happen? Literally, the words in verse 3, they say, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines?" So that is, they see why is God letting this happen? Why doesn't God take notice of us? Why does God keep letting our enemies defeat us? I know what we'll do. They say, "This is a great idea. We'll take the Ark of the Covenant into battle with us. And that means God's presence will be with us, and we'll win the battle over our enemies." It seemed like a good idea. Let's do this. And so they do. And as the Ark is coming into the camp, the Philistines hear this, and they're like, "Oh, what is this noise?" Maybe I'm going to read this section for you. Verses, you can, of course, read along with me. Verses 6, starting verse 6 of chapter 4. "When the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, 'What does the noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean?' Then they understood that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp. The Philistines were afraid, for they said, 'God has come into the camp. Woe to us! Nothing like this has ever happened before. Woe to us! Who shall deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods who smote the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness.' Then," so they recognize, I think this is interesting too, sometimes our enemies are listening more closely than we are. They remember who Yahweh is, even though they're a little confused. They say the gods, but they remember what Yahweh did in Egypt. Whereas, as we see this play out, we recognize the Israelites aren't quite remembering who Yahweh is in this situation. So that's something to keep in mind. But they say they recognize this, but then they don't let that defeat them. Although that's what the Israelites, of course, were hoping for. But instead, they take this, they man up, and they're like, all right, Philistines. Verse 9, "Take courage and be men, or you will become slaves to the Hebrews as they have been slaves to you. Therefore be men and fight." So, verse 10, "The Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent." And it becomes a very, very low time in the history of Israel. Both of Eli's sons died, which we find from earlier in the story. God had told him that this would happen, and Eli's sons were not walking with the Lord by any stretch. But even so, this represented the priesthood of Israel at the time. So Eli's sons, the priests, are dead. The ark is captured. Eli hears this news. He falls over back of the chair, breaks his neck, and dies. His daughter-in-law goes into labor early, has her baby, dies, and names the child Ichabod, no glory, because the glory of the Lord has departed, because the ark of the Lord has been captured. So it's a very, very low time for Israel. This seemed like a great idea at the time, and here they find themselves in this situation. But that's not the end of the story. What happens next? God is not going to let himself be played by the Israelites. He's not going to let himself be played by their enemies, the Philistines, for sure. So the Philistines defeat Israel. Then at this point, Israel is kind of like my friend Julie, who put on the sunscreen. They take the ark into battle. We're going to be secure, they said, but they don't listen carefully and ask, is this really what the Lord wants us to do? They just had this idea, this is going to be what we need to gain security and victory and happiness, and for God to take notice of us. Surely if he's with us, then we'll succeed. So the Philistines bring the ark. I love the way this progresses. It's so interesting. And they bring the ark, of course, into Dagon's temple, right? And then what happens next?
The
Tumbles.
it falls on his face.
Right?
Twice, yeah.
It's so funny. I love this story. Yeah, falls on his face. Not once, but twice, right? Yeah, so the first day, they're priests of Dagon. And remember, Dagon is like the chief god. He's Baal's father. So they put the ark in there, and they're saying, the God of the Israelites is inferior to our God Dagon. And then they come in the next day, and Dagon's like paying homage to Yahweh, so to speak. And they're like, I can just picture the priest like, oh, that's embarrassing. Okay, don't tell the people, set him back up. Okay, and then they come back the next day, and what's happened? Not only has he fallen over, but broken. His head comes off, his hands come off. Like, this is
It's like Herbie.
at that point, he's kind of like Herbie, yeah. At this point, I like that. They're like, okay, we've got to get it. And plus, not only is Dagon the god broken, but all the people are coming out with tumors, they're sick. The hand of the Lord was heavy upon them, to say, as contrasted with the hand of Dagon, which is literally broken. So they're like, okay, get him out of here. Take him to our neighbors in Gath. That's great. They can deal with it. We still have the Ark of the Lord, but it's in Gath. So then what happens in Gath? Same thing, right? Dagon's not there, so you don't have that part, but everyone comes out with tumors and sickness, and finally they're like, okay, we're fed up with this. I know what we'll do. Okay, this is so funny to me too. They hitch it to this cart, right, with milk cows, and they make these golden tumors. They're like, okay, well, we can't send it back empty, because obviously at this point they're realizing this God is powerful. We've got to do something to appease him, so we'll put these figurines of tumors and mice in here with the ark, and maybe that'll make him happy. So weird, right? And they just send it off. They don't even want it. Once they set it up, they don't want to touch it, and they're just going to see, like, let's see if it really was God that did this to us. And sure enough, according to what they say, it goes straight to the Israelite town of Beth-Shemesh. And, of course, the Israelites are excited to see the ark. They're like, okay, the ark is here. They sacrifice the cows and use the wood and do a sacrifice to the Lord. However, even the Israelites, again, here, are still treating the Ark of the Lord lightly. They're still acting as if, like, okay, the Lord is our, like, kind of talisman, our little good luck charm token. If we do this, like, this is our God, this is our possession, it's back, that's great. And some of them look inside of the ark, which they clearly were not commanded to do. They didn't read the sunscreen bottle. They weren't reading closely, right? They're not listening. They're not looking closely, and the Lord strikes down over 50,000 of them. So the Israelites don't have, just because they're the people of God, doesn't mean that they are exempt, and they get to do whatever they want. And so we see this same thing. We think, as the story goes, like, oh, the ark's back with Israel now, everything's going to be well. But it isn't. And the people are like, okay, and they actually say, where is it verse? Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? And they send the ark to Kiriath Jearim. So there's more to the story in these last chapters than we can really cover today. But one thing I want to highlight for us as we wrap up is in 1 Samuel 7, verse 3. Samuel addresses the Israelites, and he gets at the heart condition of what's wrong here in this whole crazy ark shenanigans saga. Verse 3, it says, Then Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, If you return to the Lord with all your heart, remove your foreign gods and the Ashtaroth from among you, and serve him alone, and he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines.
Wow.
Guess what happens next? They do, and God does. Right? They turn and they give up their idols. And it says throughout Samuel's lifetime, the Israelites triumph over the Philistines. They get their land back, and all of that is restored. And it says 7:13, because the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. And so when they returned him wholeheartedly, instead of trying to manipulate him, treat him like their good luck charm, their token, then he does deliver them from their enemy. And they have the peace and the security and the happiness that they've been looking for in right relationship with God. So if only they would have listened carefully, right, from the beginning, a whole lot of heartache and death could have been avoided. So what do we learn from 1 Samuel in this portion? The Lord is not like other gods. He's not like Dagon. His hand is strong, and he doesn't break when he doesn't topple over. And he also can't be manipulated. We don't just go and do what we want to get out of God what we want. But he also doesn't need to be manipulated. That's one of the main things that I think we can learn from this. Like, God wanted the Israelites to be successful over the Philistines, but he wasn't going to do it on their terms. He's God, they're not. He's God, we're not. We do it according to his terms. So he cannot be manipulated. He doesn't need to be manipulated. He knows what's best for us and will accomplish it in his own perfect way. So our job is simply to trust, listen, and obey.
Amen.
Don't use expired sunscreen. Read the label. Don't assume you know what God's going to do. Listen and make sure you know what he's really saying.
Amen.